But today I wanted to gather myself, do a get ready with me, and also have a conversation about America. And I think that honestly, there's a lot to discuss, and there's a lot that we should be talking about that we're not talking about, i.e., the ways in which Black people are coming up lynched in this country just does not make sense. I hate to make a general statement because I think that it's, irresponsible of a journalist or anybody who people trust with information, especially if that statement is something that cannot be actively proven. But I think that I objectively speak for most Black people when I say we do not hang ourselves, okay? If we are going to, decide that this is not the place for us anymore, I rarely will, hear about a person or see a person, or even when I have contemplated, not being here anymore, it was never by way of hanging myself from any surface tree orifice piece of matter on this earth. And I think that it's just because of all the ways as a Black person to navigate this space, yeah, that's just not the way that we're gonna go. Majority of my skin prep for doing my get ready with me's or getting ready for my day comes from Medicube, and that did not change today. Okay, so basically, now that I've gotten a little bit of hydration, I'm gonna use this toner milk. And I know it feels backwards, but for me, if I don't put something on that skin before I use this toner, my God, my face will be so dry and I need as much hydration as possible. Today, I'm going to do something a little bit more simple, something a little bit more quick, not rushed, just quick. Um, but I also wanted to do this while I had this particular conversation with you all because I knew that it wouldn't take me super long. And I have a couple of videos that I'm going to be making about these topics. So I didn't want to beat y'all over the head with, a full recap of my thoughts around this. So, as we get into all things skincare and all that jazz, I also wanted to make sure that I was making room for the amount of time that I knew I would need to do this. With that being said, one of the things that I think is really interesting about this conversation and about this topic as it pertains to Black people unaliving ourselves by way of hanging, and specifically public hanging, I'll say that, is just not something that I think that most of us would get into. I don't think that Tonia, did that to herself. I don't believe that any of the young men that have been found across Georgia, Mississippi, Miami, any of these people, I just don't believe it. Just like I didn't believe that that little boy wrapped himself up in a mat and then threw himself underneath the bleachers at a high school. None of these things make sense. And yet somehow we're supposed to all believe that these people have committed suicide in some of the most egregious ways, especially as a Black person known to man. We're also supposed to believe that toxology reports and all of these things that were drawn up by white doctors, white physicians who were also probably in cahoots with the very white police forces in these areas are to be trusted. I just don't believe that. And even if I did, I feel like a part of me would still not want to trust it inherently because unfortunately, I think in 2026, I am skeptical of anybody who is not Black. And I don't mean anybody who is not Black as in like everybody except people of color. No, people of color, y'all too, because y'all aren't Black. And I think that when it comes down to it, we've seen time and time again that y'all will sell us to the highest bidding white person, for a pork chop dinner and a visa. And so I think that when it comes down to Black people, we have to be mindful about the folks that we, are in community with. We have to be mindful about all of the people that we give time and energy and effort to. Because a lot of the time, these people are not going to be willing to give that same time, energy, and effort back to us. And it comes up and it shows up every single time something happens with our kids, every time something happens with the judicial system and the way that it treats Black people specifically, the way that it treats, Black women specifically. When we are talking about infant and mother mortality rate during birthing, or when we're talking about just the fact that we've been speaking about it for years, that Black women are dying at more rapid rates during childbirth, people are acting as though, Black folks are just screaming into this endless void of nothingness and that all of our complaints are coming from nowhere. And I beg to differ. I like to think that a lot of our complaints and a lot of our observations are coming from the fact that we've been through this, we've known somebody that's been through this, or we have witnessed it happen to someone that looked like us and we weren't able to do anything. And so I think now that we're in a space where people's voices seem to hold a lot more weight than they did before, now that we're in a space where we do have activists and advocates and people of that nature, there are so many things that I think have to happen in order for us to really be able to have truthful and honest conversations about where America is going, specifically as it pertains to Black people. And I think even more specifically as it pertains to Black women, because Lord knows we gonna need it. Y'all, this right here, as a non-water drinker, I hate to say it, but Liquid Death, I wasn't on board with y'all before. I'm on board with y'all now. Liquid Death really did its big one. Liquid Death, like y'all really just did y'all big one. That's all I have to say is that Liquid Death, when y'all made that flavored water and it was sparkling, nothing but death can keep me from it. No pun intended. But yeah, so there's just a lot that I think that we should be discussing that we are not discussing. But today I am just preparing myself to get ready to have all of the conversations and talk through all of the things necessary. Um, and so before I got into my creator bag and turned on my camera and plugged in my microphone, I just wanted to get myself together and have a quick conversation with you all, in part about what is happening with my face, because y'all are always asking, and two, what's also happening in the world and what I think about it. And so everybody has been talking about this young man who unfortunately has been found dead. And I think that there's a couple of different things that are happening. One of the things that is happening is that we are not getting enough details, truly, honestly, and really about what's going on with all of the kids that were involved, right? Everybody has deleted their social media. Nobody wants to really have conversations or talk with the press. And when I say everybody has deleted their social media, I'm talking parents and all, y'all. Like, these people are people who sit in high places in this, particular town that they're from. One of their moms is a judge. And so I think that, especially in this particular climate, deleting social media, not being active, not being willing to have a conversation, and for lack of a better understanding at this particular point, I think just being evasive just doesn't play well or in their favor at all. To me, this idea that you became immediately evasive and immediately everybody delete everything makes me feel like there's an admission of guilt already happening just by way of that. So the idea that the coroner has already reviewed this and said oh, this is a suicide, none of this actually makes sense, because if we go on a trip and I'm trying to commit suicide and I'm doing all of these things, and why would I take anybody with me? I think that this young man did not need to take a boat full of white kids, if he was going to go and commit suicide. And you're not even saying things like accidental suicide, because that I might be able to get behind, right? If y'all want us to believe that, maybe he was pulling the motor for the boat or something, fell overboard and lost his footing, and somehow a piece of kelp or seaweed or something wrapped around his neck. It was one of those weird, by chance sort of situations, I would be more inclined to believe that than believing that this young boy just decided to gather up a group of his friends and his maybe girlfriend and go out to this very populated lake or this very populated space where other people were going to be to decide that he wanted to off himself and then does it and then get like none of this makes sense. And one of the things that my mama used to say to me is that if it doesn't make sense, it's usually a what class? A lie. And I think that none of this makes sense because it's a lie. None of this makes sense because it's a lie. And again, what I think is the most egregious part about all of this, outside of the fact that a family has lost their son, yet another family has lost their son, is the fact that they really expect us to believe that this happened the way that they are trying to tell us or trying to convince us that it happened. When I think that we all kind of know that that's not how this went down. And so I I find myself in a little bit of a pickle, right? And this pickle is the one that puts me in between what do we do when, we want to give our kids a better life? And sometimes that better life comes at the expense of having what we would deem as a stereotypical Black experience. Um, and being able to give them this better life that doesn't necessarily create this isolation from blackness, right? Like, what do we really do when we really want to give them this life that is supposedly going to set them up better and give them an extra leg up in life? And this leg up comes with access. This leg up comes with being able to be in rooms that some Black folk can only dream about being in, and especially being able to do those things while you're an adolescent. But I think that a part of the conversation and the discourse that I'm seeing around this is that a lot of people are having and finding issue with the fact that this young man was there and was the only Black person involved. Now, I will say that there have been think pieces around this and think pieces about this since this story broke, right? And it's the age old question of, you know, his parents obviously wanted to give him a better shot and a better chance, but why is he the only Black person in this friend group? And why was that made to be okay? Now, there was a woman on Facebook who I am going to mention in one of my videos that I'm going to do about this, like, more formally. And she posted, and I think that the timing was off, but the message was understood, I guess, to an extent. But that young woman posted and was essentially just saying that her son's friends, are very loving and kind, and she hasn't had a negative experience with her son's friends. Now, let me tell you why this is tone deaf. And before y'all ask, she was Black, right? This is tone deaf, one, because ain't nobody asked you about your kid. Nobody asked you about your kid's experience. Nobody asked you about whether or not your kid was going to be able to make it home. Nobody asked you about whether or not, your experience with your kid having, a group full of white friends as the only Black friend was something that we wanted to know about specifically from you. And especially at a time where these people are trying to, again, like I said already, convince us that this young boy committed suicide at this very public moment in this very public place when he was with all of his friends. And those things just don't sit right. And so outside of the think pieces around him only, having white friends or being the only Black friend that was a part of this, there's also this discourse I see with other Black folk who are out here trying to convince us that that wasn't the problem, that the issue wasn't the fact that he had all white friends, because they have all white friends and they've never been subjected to the idea of being pushed overboard or whatever the fuck really happened to this kid. And I think that to say that your white friends would never, to say that your child's white friends would never is obtuse. And I also think that it's disrespectful to the family of the people who are actively grieving right now because of this kid's obviously white friends doing some shit that they had no business doing to this young man. And the fact that some of y'all are coming out and taking this opportunity to bandstand, booty clap, dick suck, and clit rub all of your white friends doesn't make any sense to me. But in a world where some of y'all are still voting for Donald Trump, I guess, I'm not surprised at the very least. But one of the things that we have to be honest about is that if we are really going to discuss this, we do have to talk about the fact that this is a nuanced and layered effect of what it means to be Black excellence, what it means to get out of the hood, what it means to find yourself in places where yes, I'm doing the best that I can for my child. Yes, I've gotten to a certain level, and so I can provide different things that I might not have been able to provide before. And also, what happens to your child's upbringing as all of these things that feel like wins because you are the adult that did not have this life turn into, I think, a level of rose colored glasses for your actual kid. None of these things are going to be none of these things are actually going to be um, I think that none of these things are actually going to be a black and white sort of conversation, right? We have the conversation about what it means to make it out. We have the conversation about what it means to become, a success as a Black person. And typically that means leaving areas where Black people often frolic and find ourselves to be most productive. But in the midst of all of that, I think that we have to be mindful of the fact that that creates judgment. And that judgment doesn't come from the outside in all the time. Sometimes that judgment stems from the places that you live, from the people that you grew up with, from the people that you talk to, from your own family. Because we'll say things like, oh my God, I'm so glad that you got up out of the hood. But then the second that you bring your baby home and your baby doesn't talk like the hood, or your baby doesn't have a hood representation of how they want to show up, then all of a sudden this baby is now up for discussion amongst all of the family. And I think that those things are unfair, but it doesn't make that apprehension amongst family members null and void. I think that we still have to be honest about the fact that as Black people, we are not going to always be as safe around white people as we would hope that we could be in 2026. And I think that a lot of us know this and we've accepted it. And so our adjacency to white people outside of having to navigate them and the ones that we've learned to trust because we feel like these are our people is very, very limited. And I think that when we're talking about the development years and when we're talking about children during the development years, it's important. And I know, at least for me, it's going to be super important for my kids to be out here navigating with other Black folks and navigating with other Black kids because there's just something that I think that is sinister about kind of sort of telling your kids that you have this amazing life and that it's centered on Black excellence and all of these other things. But then secretly, what you're really doing is trying to convince them that whiteness is better than the thing that they come from, and that whiteness is ultimately and inherently better than who they actually are, which is the reason why you'll get some of these privileged Black men who don't see it for Black women and will turn around and say, oh, but Black women never liked me at my school or whatever the case may be. And it's because it was happening to both of y'all. Black women didn't like you at your school because Black men didn't like Black women at that school. And so now we're perpetuating on both sides this idea or this narrative that Blackness is not good enough. And especially not in a space where you have to be seen as valuable by white folks. And to be seen as valuable by white folks, you need to be paired up with one of them, typically the most popular one. But what we don't see in that dynamic or that dichotomy in and of itself is that they are using you for the clout. They're able to say that they are with this very likely talented, very likely smart, very likely hyper attractive person that doesn't really exist in their own community. And so they're eager to actually create that with someone outside of it. And that's usually going to be you. The problem with that is that the conversations that ensue amongst friend groups, the conversations that ensue amongst family members, the conversations that ensue among mama and P-pop them who only come into town once in a blue moon, but then find out that you got a Black boyfriend or a girlfriend and now all hell done broke loose. There's so much to navigate when we're talking about these situations that we put our children in for the sake of being able to say, look, mama, I made it. My baby ain't got to go to the public school no more. My baby's in the private school with all the white kids. And I want to be very clear that this is not something that I want y'all to be out here playing obtuse about should you decide to see this movie and hold on to the themes in this movie. And by movie, I mean this my little TED talk here. When you decide to watch this and you decide to watch these things, these are not isolated events and these are not things that I'm about to sit up here and play with y'all about. As Black people, we know damn well when we do a lot of these things and when we separate these kids and when we move the way that we move, we know exactly what we're doing. We know exactly the life that we're trying to give them. We know exactly the statement that we're trying to make to the people around us, whether they want to hear it or not. And a lot of us have to come out of this spirit of trying to pretend to be hyper pro black while doing things that are inherently anti black, taking some of the best and brightest minds out of our community schools and putting them into these private schools where they learn to hate themselves before they learn to uplift people. I've learned that the system does not work for us, not just because niggas don't come back and they don't want to give back, but because niggas have never been taught to come back and give back, because the life and the lifestyle that they have been gifted by their parents does not leave room or prepare them in that mindset. When I grow up around a bunch of other privileged people, even if those people are not my skin tone, even if those people are not, a part of my overall culture, because I can hang with them financially, because I can do the same things that they do socially, I believe that culturally I deserve a piece of the privilege that they get naturally because of the color of their skin. And the issue with that is that in the midst of trying to give your children these better lives, in the midst of trying to make sure that your children do not have the same struggles that you had, you also deprive them of the understanding that they are not like their friends, that they will never be like their friends, and that some of their friends are truly and really and honestly not even their friends to begin with. Some of their friends are people who see them as competition, but lacks the ability to be able to name their racism. Some of them are people who have been put in place to throw your children off their guard because they've been promised a certain level of life quality that your child will never actually have. Like, y'all ever stop to think about the reason for why some of these kids even become friends in the first place? And then all of a sudden, these kids just so happen to be, the daughters and the sons of judges and police officers. Some of these situations are very interesting. And as I get ready to do my research around some of these deaths, and especially as it pertains to these kids, I find it interesting, or I'm curious to see how interesting it's going to be, that I'm going to probably find a lot of these kids had friends who had parents who were in the judicial system in one way or another. Some of these friends have parents who are police officers. Some of them have parents who are judges, like we're seeing in this particular situation. And others of them have parents who are lawyers or whatever the case may be, doctors, people who are in high places or have access and control to people who are in high places. And to be perfectly honest with you all, I know some of y'all are going to think that I'm crazy. Some of y'all are going to call me an extremist. Some of y'all are going to say that this is a very radical thought. But I don't put it past white supremacy and white supremacists to use their children, to weaponize their children, to get rid of Black children by way of fake friendships and pseudo relationships where they get to learn the ins and outs about this person so that they can easily do away with or get rid of these children, and they are able to get off. And instead of doing it themselves and being seen as a grown man or woman attacking a child, they get children to do it so that way, if they get caught, it's a boys will be boys situation. It's not an adult assaulting a child. And also because in their places of privilege and in their places of power, these people then can turn around and save their children before any actual real damage is done. And by the time people realize what fucking Ponzi scheme this is, these kids are going to be older and they're going to be in positions of power thanks to their parents who use them. What I find to be really interesting is how people like George Floyd and Kyle Rittenhouse can literally just be out here living their life, moving on, doing speaking engagements and all of this other bullshit. And I know that some of y'all are going to say things like, oh, but like doing a booking and speaking engagements for the right wing, doesn't make them famous. It doesn't, but it makes them more visible. And the fact of the matter is, these people don't deserve visibility. And a lot of us are so busy being upset about the wrong things within the Black community that we miss out on opportunities to actually shed light on things that really, really do actually need our help. And I say that with the utmost base in my chest, because I need for people to know, and I need for people to understand, and I need for people to start seeing. And by people, I do mean us as Black folks. I need for us to start realizing and seeing that these people do not mind sacrificing themselves, their children, or their own livelihood for the sake of the cause of white supremacy. And so we need to be able to be willing to do those same things for the sake of Black liberation. That was the difference between us and our ancestors, which is why I also get so upset when I hear people saying things like, oh, we ain't like them. We're not like them. You know what? Y'all are right. We're not like them. We're not like our ancestors, because our ancestors would have got together. They would have rallied. They would have fought back. They wouldn't have taken the time to have petty arguments about trans people or gay people. Now, that's not to say that the movement did not include the exclusion of some people within that. But it is to say that we all got over ourselves and did the thing that needed to be done, so that that way we can live to fight another day about some bullshit that don't matter, such as what somebody was born as or not born as you know, as it pertains to the movement. I don't give a shit if I'm protesting next to a trans man. I don't give a shit if I'm protesting next to a lesbian. I don't care if I'm protesting next to a person with disabilities. What I do care about is whether or not I'm protesting next to somebody who wants freedom for all Black people. Because if you don't want that, then I don't want to be standing next to you, because if something pops off and happens, I'm liable to push your ass in front of a thing, and I want to be so close that I might fall, right? And I think that we have to be honest and open about that part of the movement. We're not talking about that part of the movement. We're not talking about the part of the movement that isn't fun to discuss, which is that in certain ways and in certain instances, we have made ourselves easy targets for the sake of trying to find our way out of a system that we were never meant to actually succeed. We were never actually meant to get that piece of cheese. We were never actually meant to complete the rat race. The fact that we did is a consolation prize that they never saw coming, which is the reasons why we'll never get reparations, because they never saw us getting to a point where we were smart enough to ask for them. And if we did, they never saw us being in position and power enough to be able to actually demand them. And now that we have both, now that we have an understanding of both, now that we understand the law in ways that I think that they don't even understand the law, because they never expected us to learn them enough to be able to use them, weaponize them against them, they are in a space where now they're desperate. And what it looks like is killing our children. That's what this looks like to me. It looks like killing our children. It looks like getting rid of the next generation of activists and fighters and people who are going to learn and keep these traditions and keep all of this information sacred. Because without this information continuing to be passed along, without this information continuing to live in the stories that other activists tell, without these strategies and workshops and things that we do in order to continue to keep each other sharp, the rest of these kids are going to fall into a chat GPT AI world where everything thinks for them. They're not going to be proofreading this information. They're going to be disseminating things that are not true. They're going to be continuing to further the agenda of white supremacy by feeding back their talking points. Because again, AI is racist, because AI is not built, at least certain AIs are not built with Black people in mind. And I say this because what y'all also have to know, if you haven't paid attention to it, the reason why I'm saying AI is racist is put in a prompt, any prompt with AI, right? Even a prompt that is specific to like the Black or DEI experience, it's still going to do its best to find a way to incorporate white people into this very, very not white thing. And that to me says that the people that are building AI are not building it under the basis or for the purpose of making sure that Black and brown people can see themselves represented in any of the imagery that is either thought up, drawn up, or rendered by any of its services. When you think about the way that ChatGPT works, it always is going to give you a white version of an image unless you specifically ask it to, or unless it specifically has an image to go off of, and that's weird and random. Even when you're thinking about using tools like Beautiful AI, if you're a person who creates programming or graphs or charts or slides and things of that nature, and you're using Beautiful AI, it doesn't matter what you're talking about. Your literal program or your literal slide deck can be called Black Women in Business, narrowing down financial literacy. And even though your project is going to be named Black Women in Business, every image photo that it comes up that has a person in it is not going to necessarily be a Black woman. It's always going to be a person of color or a Black adjacent looking woman, but it's never just going to be a Black woman. And that is because AI is not built for you to see yourself if you are a Black person. If you're a brown person, maybe, because they can kind of sort of deal with, the browns. But when you're talking about being a Black person and utilizing these spaces and utilizing these things, that's not how any of this is going to actually work in our favor, because they don't want us to see ourselves in these programs, which is why putting these kids in these spaces where they no longer have to learn, where they no longer have to actually be around other Black folks, where we're not sharing this information amongst them and amongst each other, is detrimental to the cause. We have to be able to put these kids in a situation where they are being set up for success and not just set up to kind of sort of exist within the system. And I think that if we continue to do that, that's what we're going to see. We're going to see a dropping of history. We're going to see a dropping of the spreading of knowledge. We're going to see these kids slowly fall out of Big Mama traditions and slowly fall out of Black Panther rhetoric. And they're going to start to move into this space where AI is telling them how to think, what to think, and who's valuable. And I honestly don't believe that we're taking that seriously enough. We're not taking it seriously enough because I think that so many folks and so many anti-AI warriors are out here talking about the water. And while I think that that is great, and that's a great use of, making sure that people are informed about AI. But what we have to also be mindful of, booze and bears, is that when we are having these discussions, when we are having these conversations about AI, we're talking about its effect on the environment, but rarely are we talking about its effect on the minds of the children that are using it. Y'all are talking about adults who are using this shit to see themselves as something that they could never imagine that they could possibly be. And while that still uses the same resources that we shouldn't be out here pulling from, I understand that that's not as dangerous as having kids be out here using it for their history projects and having that AI feed them inaccurate information that is both accepted by their white teachers and counterparts, because that is what they want them to believe. Y'all think that it's a short game, and y'all think that MAGA is done with just the social attacks and all of those things. And I am here to tell y'all that is not how I believe that any of this is going to work. And I'm saying that that is not how I believe because I am not some, 50-year vet in strategy as it pertains to the stats and the numbers around racism and the way that it shows up. So I am not going to claim to be an expert in this field. I definitely believe that there probably are experts in this field who will pop out of the woodwork and, do the ones and twos, but I'm not that person. So I am going to hold myself accountable for saying, I don't know this to be true, but I do feel like this is exactly what the end game and what the end goal is. If we can't get you like this, we're going to get you like that. And if we can't get you like that, we're going to get you like this. They have so many moving balls at play at one time, and most of them are not working on this larger demographic of older folks. We're out here trying to make this about us, and it's really not about us. It's a long game for the minds of our children. And if they can also justify the deaths of our children's peers in their face and get away with it, it starts to paint this picture to our kids that nothing is worth it. And that's what they want. They don't want the next generation of activists to emerge. They don't want the next generation of liberatory figures to emerge. They don't want us to have a relationship to being able to stand up and show up in acts of civil disobedience. They want us to be docile. They want us to forget the history that led us to this space in the first place. And they want to do it right in front of our face. They want to do it right in front of our face. And that's why these situations, they work me. These situations work me because we're allowing these people to just kind of sort of get away with murder. In certain cases, quite literal murder. And that just isn't cool. So, I think that I'm at a space with, this entire situation around the death of one, the leaving and the idea of drowning of another. I'm not sure if y'all heard of that story or have seen that story floating around or circulating and making its ways on on the social medias as well, but there is a young boy who went out swimming or went out to a lake with his friends. They knew that he could not swim. They left him with a miniature life jacket, and proceeded to yell at him from their boats where they were not swimming, that he was a pussy and that the life jacket would help him stay afloat, even though that life jacket was both ill fitted and also not for an adult his size. So, I think that that's just really interesting that all of these things are sort of happening simultaneously, one after the other, because I also believe that they're trying to find new ways to kill us without getting their hands dirty. Why would you take someone who can't swim, who can't swim, out into the middle of a, body of water and just say, find yourself? And also, why did it take strangers to help this young man get back onto shore? And I'm so happy that at the end of the video, if you haven't seen it and don't know what I'm talking about, hopefully the algorithm will do its thing now that you're watching a video of someone discussing it. But at the end of the video, what I really appreciated was that this young man says, I'm never coming back here with you all again. And he doesn't ever really get upset or vocally upset that we can hear. He doesn't really get visually upset that we can see. All this young man does is makes a conscious understanding of what is happening to him in this moment, why it's happening to him in this moment, and then makes a conscious decision in that moment to know that I will never be doing this again. And I think that that's a testament to his understanding of, one, self-respect, and two, his understanding of of what do you call it, situational awareness. Sometimes situational awareness requires you to know when, the elevator door closed funny, or when the tide is moving a little weird, and so you got to go grab your little sister from the shore of the beach, right? But I think that situational awareness also puts us in spaces where a thing is happening, a situation is happening, and although this situation could go wrong, because it is not going wrong, you're also paying attention to why it is happening in real time and making decisions based off of what you know to be true and not what people are trying to convince you is happening about a situation that you are actively experiencing. Because that's another thing that also is happening, I think, very directly with Black people in this moment, but also it's an experience that I think that we have been, sold time and time and time again. Don't believe what you see, don't believe what you think, don't believe what you know to be true, don't believe anything that you should believe what we are telling you to believe. And that is that white people are not capable of harming you, and that it's all in your head, and that white men have never once wanted to harm you, and that this idea that the Klan still exists is something that Black people are keeping alive. It's not a thing. It doesn't exist. It never really has. Like all of these different things. The Democrats started the Klan, and that's like a new fun fact for some of these people. And I just believe that in the midst of us searching and hooting and hollering and trying to find our way through life and trying to find our way into a better something, it cannot just be, I got to make it out of the hood so that my kids can get a better education. Because sometimes trying to get your kids a better education will get you a box to put your kids in. And we've just got to accept that, unfortunately, that's the reality when dealing with some of these people, because they don't see us as human beings. Now, I'm going to be just a smidge quiet, because if you know anything about makeup, you know that the brow can make or break the face. And because I don't want my face broken, girl, I am just going to do a little wash of this concealer here. I'm going to blend her out really nice and sturdy, like whoop, whoop, whoop. Just like that. Get a nice clean girl brow aesthetic. And fun fact is that I don't really always fill in my brows or have to fill in my brows, especially if I've done like a little maintenance on them recently. My brows typically really behave for me. And so I rarely have instances where I really like am obligated to go in and do like brow touch ups and things. Now, if I just feel like there's a hole in my brow that I can't close with like brushing and shaping and things, I'll definitely go in and kind of like add a little bit of a hair stroke to those spaces. But beyond that, my brows are typically natural with just some concealer underneath it because, yeah, I ain't got time for the foolishness. Um, there is there's a lot that I think that we as Black folks should be talking about. And when we are having these conversations, especially in our silos, I think that we do ourselves a disservice. And I think that a part of the reason why we're having these issues happen so frequently and so often as of late is one, because of the desperation of the people that are doing it, but also two, because of the lack of our ability to respond to these things appropriately. And I know some of y'all are going to say, well, Hope, what is the appropriate response? What do you think the appropriate response would be? What do you think that the appropriate response should be? And let me tell y'all something. At this point, if we're not beating the shit out of these people, what are we doing? And yes, I'm advocating for violence. I'm not gonna sit back here and pretend like I'm not gonna gaslight y'all. I'm not about to play in y'all face. I am advocating for violence because that's what these people give to us every chance they get. They kill our children, they kill us, they kill the system that works to, ensure that we are in a better place. They're doing their best to roll back our rights and our protections. And so at this point, if they're gonna be violent, and we've been nonviolent, we've done the nonviolent thing, we've done all of this stuff, we got to start whooping their ass because I also believe that that's the reason that they try again every now and then. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of just like a dog. When you're training that dog is still learning what it can and can't get away with. It's still trying to figure out your parenting style. It's still trying to see whether or not you're going to let it climb up on this couch today, but not other days. Because the day that you let that dog on this couch, just for 30 seconds, just for 10 minutes, or whatever the case may be, that dog is going to know that at some point, and for whatever reasons, it can get on the couch, right? But when you are firm in letting this dog know that it cannot jump on your furniture, it never will. And I think that the reason why these dogs keep jumping on our furniture is because we keep giving them leeway to do so. We keep giving them leeway to do so. We're out here woe is meing instead of whooping ass. We're out here woe is me instead of bopping bitches. And I think that while to some degree and for some people it's not necessary, we can't be doing that. Oh my God, what does it say to the kids? It says to the kids that some things are worth fighting for. And our freedoms are a part of those some things. Our livelihood is a part of those some things. Our systems are a part of those some things. Our culture are a part of those some things. And there are not a lot of people who are going to be willing to fight for them outside of us. And so we have to be able to do that for ourselves. That's what I believe it will say to the kids. A lot of you all are out here pretending and pussyfooting around these issues because y'all think that the kids don't know what's happening. Y'all are still out here acting as if the kids are not all right, but they are. Sometimes these kids understand better than us what's happening because they're more in tune. They're more face planted in what's going on. Because these kids are not just our kids, but these are the kids of these racist folks that our kids are going to school with and having to endure. And so a lot of the time, these people are teaching their kids how to treat our kids, and our kids are going to these schools and figuring this shit out in real time, but not being able to have real conversations with adults who are actively navigating this in a space that the kids don't have access to, i.e. adulthood, i.e. being able to technically, or what should feel like, do what you want to do. And our kids just don't have that. And that's unfortunate. And it all feels sad and it all feels fucked up and sucky. But I think that the only way to get around it is to be mindful about where we spend our time and our capacity. A lot of us want to spend our time and our capacity in spaces that we don't belong to. A lot of y'all want to be organizers and have no clue how to organize. A lot of you all want to be organizers and have no clue how to actually follow the lead of the people that are putting together the plan. A lot of you all don't even want to be organizers, you just want to be famous. And let me be very clear, this is the pot. Hey, I'm calling kettle black. I also would like to be famous for my work, but I also know when this ain't my work. And so I don't need to be famous off of somebody else's stuff. A lot of you all don't know how to actively support a mission before creating your own mission out of spite. And that's the thing that keeps our movements so far behind, because we do not know how to create space for things that we don't own while we're actively building whatever our framework or our model is going to be. It's always these two things have to exist both at the same time right now. I got this really dope idea while you also had this really dope idea. And even though I came to your workshop first, now I'm inspired. And because I don't want to work under you, I'm just going to create something else. And all of this stuff creates confusion. And all of it ultimately ends up hindering the people who we need the most, the kids. Everybody's confused. Everybody's, upset. Everybody is trying to figure out the best way to do this stuff. And some of that stuff is going to be mobilization at the polls. Some of that stuff is going to be ass whoopings for white people who are out here showing the fuck up. And some of that is going to be looking like, I don't know what to do. And I'm just waiting on my opportunity to be used in the movement. And none of those things are wrong. At no point are any of those things going to be a bad thing to do. But I also believe that we have to be willing and open and honest enough to have the conversations about what isn't being done in order to start doing the things that do need to be done. It's just that simple. It is just that simple. If we're going to be calling each other in, we have to do so with love and the understanding that some people are just making their way to this movement, whereas some people have lived in this movement and moved through it their entire life for whatever reason. Some people had activists in their family. Some people got Black Panthers in their family. Some people got all types of folk that they have had to navigate through in order to be the people that they are. And so I think that, like, as we continue to have conversations around these kids, as we continue to have conversations around lynchings, period, we need to also be moving in intention with our language. I was talking to my mom the other day about the situation with Tonia out in Miami at Gwen Cherry Park, and I remember the first thing that my mom said is that was a lynching. Like, I was like, oh yeah, mom, like this, they saying that this girl committed suicide and all of that stuff. We know that that's not true. And my mama was like, well, of course it's not true because it was a lynching. They lynched that girl. And it was interesting to me because I was like, damn, it's crazy that like my mom was so radically ready to like call it what it was. My mom was like, we're not going to say nothing outside of what it was. It was a lynching. And I think that some of us are too afraid to call it that because then it makes us feel like we have to do something different than what we've been doing. If it just sits as a piece of news, if it just sits, as a piece of something that you're hearing in passing or something that you're talking about passively, then yeah, it feels like, oh yeah, this girl, might have hung herself at the park, but we don't believe that, or whatever the case may be. There was foul play, something ain't right. And it's like, no, we can't just be out here using things that feel synonymous with the truth. We have to be out here telling the truth. And the truth is that we are being lynched again. That's just the truth, is that we are being lynched again in 2026, and it really hasn't stopped because there are cases that I can track back to like 2016 of people being found hung at schools and in forests and on hiking trails and things of that nature. The fact of the matter is we had a young lady leave the country with a white man who I'm pretty sure she thought was about to save her and pull her out of the squalor, and boom, man offed her and tried to do it in a whole different fucking continent. Like, these things just don't make sense. But we have to start to name them as what they are: lynchings, murders, killings, hangings. That is what they are doing to us. This is not 5 o'clock news where we are still trying to figure out the details and X, Y, and Z. Even if the news won't say it, we have to be willing to say it. We have to be willing to say that these kids ain't shit, some of them, that these people ain't shit, some of them. And at this point, as a Black person, I don't feel bad about telling white people, hey, you are guilty until proven innocent in my book. And that's just the way that it is. Because I can't trust that I can be safe with you just based off of your initial appearance. I can't trust that I'm going to be safe with you just based off of what you were telling me in this particular moment. As Black people, there's not a lot of folks that we can trust at their word or at face value anymore, because these people are weaponizing the way that their words can be used later on for the sake of their need and desire and sick, whatever, to kill us. These people have no real desire, some of them, to be in partnership, to be in friendship, to be cool with us. They have every intention to make us feel like tertiary citizens at every stop. And they think that right now they are closer to being able to do that than they ever have been. And thus, they are scrambling. They are punching and kicking the air. They are doing all of these different things to make themselves feel superior, because even in the midst of all of their resources, even in the midst of Project 2025 being moderately successful, even in the midst of them being able to get most of the things that they said that they would get done, shit still hasn't really changed for them or gotten better for them. And they are blaming Black people for that. They are blaming immigrants for that. They are blaming anybody that does not look like a white man for that. Because unfortunately, white women, some of y'all, baby, horrible, disgusting. Stand up. I need y'all to do that. Because a lot of you all don't understand that as you're trying to sign the rights and liberties and autonomies away from other people, you are also signing away your own rights and really signing yourself into a death note. And I also just wonder how many of them are going to be comfortable leaving their Chanel behind and covering their head up when we go back into a space of Sharia law. Like, y'all are so free and y'all think that y'all have so much power in this particular moment. But if these white men could have what they wanted to have, they would be fucking each other and pulling y'all out once a year for a ceremony where they get you pregnant and put you back in a box. These white men, most of them don't like you. They tolerate y'all because they feel like they have to, and because they haven't figured out a way to make gay okay in public society while also managing to keep its masculine look. They're really trying to create an entire new Spartan sort of society where men don't have to deal with women outside of creating a space for birthing. And that's the only time that a lot of you white women are going to see these white men that y'all are caping for and talking about are so good for, the American history. These men don't like y'all. These men don't want to be bothered with y'all. A lot of these men can't stand you. When I talk to my husband sometimes, my husband is in the Navy. And my husband will sit back and tell me how a lot of these men sit around, right? And mind you, they're on deployment. These are men who are on deployment. Some of them haven't seen their wives for 6 months. Some of them go on back to back deployments on purpose that they don't have to go on to. And they will sit around and talk about how they are so sick of their wives and they are so sick of the way that they, have to maneuver when they're at home. And they're so sick of this and they're so sick of that. And these men just genuinely sound like, at least in my husband's opinion, that they don't even like women. It's like they want to be surrounded with each other in the middle of the sea for the rest of their life. And that is the way that white men treat white women all the time. It's not like this new thing. The misogyny of white men runs deep. And it's deep because it's something that we've been taught to see as normal. I remember being a kid and, watching Love and Marriage, right? Or what was that show that we watched with um the stupid daughter and the stupid son, actually. And then it had that one guy. and the traditionally average like looking mom. I think it was Love and Marriage, but they had the theme song that was like Love and Marriage, Love and Marriage. So that show, right? When we look at that dynamic, that is white people in at their core. Because that show does not showcase a healthy family dynamic. What that show does do is it showcases the way that white men uh genuinely, truly, and typically want to be left alone by the women that they've chosen to marry. And outside of needing those women for things like status symbols or pissing contests with other men, they don't typically enjoy the company of white women. And I learned this at a very early age because most of our shows taught us this. But I also have to hold on to the fact that in black spaces and on black sitcoms and black television shows, it was the exact antithesis. We saw relationships be navigated with care and love and honesty, even when there were episodes that were difficult to, watch because of subject matter. It was never things where we saw black people, especially black people in coupled relationships, have to navigate what it meant to be completely disrespectful and calling each other out of their names and just saying disgusting things to one another all the time. And it just feels like it's one thing when the joke is just a joke and it lands and you move on and it's like a little dig at your partner. But what I saw in a lot of these white sitcoms was that it seemed like a lot of white people normalized this idea that white women love their husbands even when their husbands don't love them in return. And this sparked a conversation for me with my grandmother about the servitude of white women versus the freedom of black women. And in a lot of cases, the government felt like it was taking black women's autonomy away by removing black men because that was how white women operated. White women couldn't function or do much without their husbands, whereas black women had already had to navigate without black men. And so by the time the government started to interfere and actually aid and abet in helping that, it was already too late. Black women had already known the tricks and were already functioning in households where men had to be, somewhat silent in order for the family to survive. And so white people were wondering why their tricks weren't working on the African family, at least in ways that dismantled us completely. And it was because the tricks that you use on black women don't work the way that they do on white women because black women were not taught to be subservient to black men. And when I say that, I don't mean that that means that black women don't know how to serve black men. It just means that we were not taught to be subservient to black men for the sake of them being born black men. That's just not how that works. If you want respect, you have to earn it. You have to give it. You have to do things in return for it. And a lot of the time, that's just not what happens. There is a huge abuse that does happen in the system. There is a lot of degrounding work that happens in the system for women. And I think that one of the most pivotal things that happens is that young girls are often trained to disbelieve and disapprove of anything that makes them feel liberated while leaning into things that make men feel good. And while I am really, really glad to see that most of that practice kind of sort of starts and stops with white women, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And so I really would like to know or look into how to change this rhetoric. And I think that some of it is going to have to happen in conversations around the deaths and the lynching of our children. They're going to have to happen in the way that we see Black excellence. They're going to have to happen in the way that we see relocation for the sake of safety, while also putting our children in harm's way while we're at work, or building a better life for them abroad. And we have to be mindful that we thought that we were the targets, and the whole time these people have moved on. They found a new target, and they're doing their due diligence to work them over right in our faces. And in certain degrees, we're calling that Black excellence, when really it is a slow roll and a slow burn to our own demise. All right, that's the finished look. This has been my little TED talk for y'all. I'm going to do my hair and things off camera, but I hope that y'all enjoyed this Get Ready with Me and this talk about what Black people should be doing, in my opinion. And y'all let me know in the comments, how do you feel about some of the things that I said? Do y'all like the idea of me doing my makeup while I'm doing this, or do y'all want me to be a little bit more focused? Do y'all like the idea of doing makeup, but y'all want separate videos where I talk specifically about makeup? Or was this formula something that works for you? Do you like the talk and sort of makeup mixed together? Let me know. And until next time, I'll see y'all around. Bye, everybody.